Hi, welcome. My name is Angelique, and today I'm talking about the moon in Scorpio as it relates to astrology. So, if you have this placement or you're just looking for some more information, different pathways to understand this placement, this episode is going to do a deep dive and uncover the mythology, symbolism of this placement so we can understand it. And I'm using a lens of the inner child healing. The moon in astrology represents our childhood, the darker parts of ourselves, the past, childhood, mother. So this is a great placement to look at to uncover what might have been happening in the childhood of someone and maybe give us some tips on how we can heal this part of ourselves, especially as it relates to our emotions. If it's your first time listening, I've been a student of astrology for over 30 years, and I have a background in counseling, mental health, and psychology. So I really like to dive deep, uncover things, especially as it relates to our psyche, our personality, but also our physicality, our health, wellness. There's so many grounded, practical ways we can use astrology, not just for future prediction, but that I use it that way as well. So, starting with the sign, I want to look at Scorpio as it relates to our emotions and our intuition, that internal part of ourselves. Now, I'm just going to focus on the emotional side of the sign as it relates to mythology, but if you want to know a little more about where Scorpio gets its personality or its traits from mythology, that can be found in I Have a Sun in Scorpio episode where I talk a little more about the mythology just as an overview. But Scorpio is interesting because it has new and old rulers depending on which school of astrology you are practicing or learning about. Traditionally, Scorpio is ruled by the planet Mars, and Mars was a Roman god with emotions that could be considered independent, driven, motivated, but also anger, bold, also fiery, passionate. That's what we can ascribe to the the planet and the god Mars. Now, since the discovery of Pluto, Pluto has become more of the new ruler of Scorpio under uh, the modern astrology. So we're looking at the mythology of Pluto. I think especially for emotional child healing, there's a lot here as well to uncover. But Pluto, in a nutshell, was the god of the underworld and was one of the few gods that didn't have like multiple wives, mistresses. They had he had one wife and children from that wife. So it was a very monogamous god, which was unusual for a Roman and Greek mythology, which share some similarities. Usually there's multiple partners. And I think that speaks a lot to the emotional nature of Scorpio, that there's this intensity and this need to uncover or go deeper, but also not wanting to change too much, not wanting too much to go on that they're not in control of. So Pluto just having one wife was all consuming, that his attention was completely on her and didn't really see anything, didn't want to really bring anybody else in or have other relationships on that level. And so as we relate to emotions, there can be a intense focus to people who have Scorpio in this placement of your emotions. It's going to give a very strong component, but also a very deep connection to other people and your own emotions. However, being the ruler of the underworld with Pluto, we can say symbolically that getting to that emotional closeness, that emotional depth with someone's own emotions and other people can be almost like a death, like a symbolic death, because to get to the underworld, we have to die. We have to transform in a significant way to reach this place. So, Scorpio, when it comes to emotions, is yes, those emotions are very deep, but also it can be very scary to access these emotions. It can be scary to be emotionally connected to other people when you have this placement. And I'll go a little more into why that might be with the childhood, but just knowing that Scorpio, while it has that nature to be deep and transformative, people who have Moon in Scorpio, their emotional life might have a lot of turmoil or traumatic things, because that transformation, that symbolic death and rebirth is going to be at the core of how this person emotes and how they feel things. So there could very well be just this darker edge, this mysterious edge, and emotions might be hard for them to connect with on a deeper level. And so that's where we're seeing Scorpio and its emotions is, yes, there's an intuitive nature, intelligence, and very transformative, but because of that need to be so close and almost a possessive quality, like we said, this god Pluto only had one wife and was very possessive and uh very like focused directly on her. There can be this fear of loss. So people who have Moon in Scorpio can feel abandoned or even vindictive because of that need to control and possess. Once the sign of Scorpio connects to something emotionally, it's very close, it can be very hard for them to let go, or it can, because it almost takes so much out of them, their vulnerability to even let people in. So once people are trustworthy and they're in the inner world with someone who has Moon in Scorpio, it can be very hard for them to let that person go. They might do a lot to try and keep this person because of that earlier instances or experiences of maybe having to let go of someone near and dear to them. And we'll get into that a little more. But when it comes to the symbols of the elements, Scorpio is a water sign. However, because of that intensity and that fiery energy that comes from the Mars ruler, you have this push and pull of intuitive, sensitive quality, but also an intensity, a direct need to be first. Mars is, above all else, about themselves. It can be a very selfish type of energy because that fire is all about your passions and going after what you want at all costs. Now, and then you combine that with water, that's going to make someone that is going to be intuitive but also very passionate. They're going to be maybe very direct but also very protective of their emotions. So it can be challenging for people who have this placement to be open and honest, not only with other people but with themselves, because they are going to protect their emotions and themselves more so than anything else. When it comes to emotions, protection is going to be key. It can also be harder to access because of, like I said before, um that that need to transform to get to those emotions. It can, I think of it as being near this very deep water, leagues under the sea. It goes far and far, and it can be scary and unnerving, and we don't know what's in there. Hidden things, things that could hurt us, could be in there. And so it would make sense that a lot of people might just avoid that and not even go into the water because of what might come about. And that's how Moon and Scorpio can can experience their emotions. That on some level, because it is a vast well of deep emotions that could be scary or harmful or even traumatic because of past grief or loss. It might be hard to connect to those emotions because of the fear around it, that they might not want to get into that abyss because it could be all consuming. It could be so intense that it makes them lose a self control. And remember, Scorpio has that fixed quality to it. It likes that control. Like Pluto is a leader, Mars is a leader. They like to be in control. So we want to be in control of our emotions when we have Moon in Scorpio, but emotions don't always work that way. So it's a push and pull energy with emotions. People who have Moon in Scorpio, they have them and they have them very strongly. But if it rocks their sense of control or their need to protect themselves, or they feel like they might be out of control, they might just completely close off to those emotions or close off other people to their emotions, especially if they've been hurt or have been subjected to grief or loss to something before. So when it comes to the childhood, Moon and Scorpio child most likely had some of these themes surrounding their home, their parents, their mother growing up. So there might have been themes of loss. Um, there might have also been this need to transform a lot as a child. So this could be grief and loss of a parent, or a parent that maybe abandoned them, or a parent that was just never there, especially in the younger years. There could also be a sense that the home, uh, the parent or mother, there might have been a distance, an emotional distance. There might have been mystery around the parent. It can take any of these themes, and everybody's gonna, have their own unique experiences. But there just might have been something growing up with a parent that was hard to understand, or forced a deep transformation in this person. And so, growing up, this can make someone who has this placement be deeply intuitive about other people. And so they might not be as risky or open to jump into a deep, intimate connection because they might not perceive it to be safe. They're not sure about this person. And especially if someone else has a lot of layers up, has their guard up a lot, it can, someone with Moon and Scorpio might not get completely open with this person at first. So it's kind of like a show me yours, I'll show you mine energy with a Moon and Scorpio, especially if there's been a lot of personal loss and grief, that they might be on the defensive for their emotions. So meeting someone first, the other person might not do anything that's inherently bad, but the Moon and Scorpio person might just be like, I don't know, and just might um, come off a little detached, uh, especially from their emotions. So they might not give a lot of clues, and can come off intimidating because of this. Because there's a desire to be close to people, but there's also this fear that you get close to somebody and they might leave you. So it can be a very intensely private placement. A person might only have select few people in their inner world because they want to keep that small. It can be challenging. So, coming to healing the inner child with someone with Moon and Scorpio is to find this depth within yourself emotionally, but also with other people. And this can look a lot of different ways. This can just be um, finding ways to experience authenticity. with yourself first can make it easier then to feel authentic with other people. And so that can look like collaging or doing any type of art where you are making a big transformation or it's about a transformation. Any books, film, or TV that have a mystery component or they're about the taboo, they're about anything hidden, where you're really diving deep and finding out what is true, what is authentic about this character, this person, and how that relates to you. Maybe there is books, TV, or film that relates to a personal experience you had. And that can be deeply healing and make you feel authentic and safe. And so sharing these experiences with other people, feeling open to share intimately and deeply with other people is one of the best ways to help heal this placement, is to not be afraid of the deeper or the darker depths of your emotions, but to embrace it and feel safe being close to people, to being seen, to being open. So that's Moon in Scorpio. It's a very intense placement to talk about because there's a lot going on and it's very emotional, but it can be also very healing for themselves and other people, especially when they're not afraid to be authentic or deep with themselves and other people. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you have this placement, I'd love to hear how this shows up for you. You can leave a comment. I would appreciate that. But otherwise, just thanks again for spending this time with me and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.